Visual, black screen, slow heartbeat sound, door closing slowly, you know someone who just disappeared. No fight, no warning, no explanation. One day they were in your life, texting back, showing up, being present, and then they simply weren't. They cut off their friends, their family, maybe even you. And everyone around them whispered the same thing, something is seriously wrong with them. But psychology tells a very different story, and that story is what this video is about. Visual, person walking alone on an empty road, ambient music building softly. In today's video we are going deep into one of the most misunderstood behaviors in all of human psychology, the psychology of people who cut everyone off. Not the ones who ghost you over something petty, not the dramatic fallouts, but the people who go completely silent, who withdraw from entire social circles, who seem cold and distant and totally unreachable. Most people have no idea that their brain does this as a pure survival mechanism. And by the end of this video, whether you have been cut off by someone or you are the one who cuts people off, you will finally understand why it happens and what the brain is actually trying to protect itself from. Stay until the end, because the last point will change how you see every single relationship in your life. Visual, battery draining to zero, person sitting alone in a dark room, phone face down. Here is something most people never consider. The human brain has a limited capacity for social connection, and psychologists call this cognitive load. Managing relationships, the texting back, the showing up, the emotional labor of just being present for other people, burns more mental energy than almost anything else you do in a day. For most people this feels manageable, maybe even enjoyable. But for certain personality types, especially empaths, highly sensitive people, and those carrying a history of emotional trauma, social interaction does not just drain them a little. It depletes them completely, right down to the bone. Think about that friend who used to be the life of every room, always texting back within minutes, always the first to show up. And then one day, nothing. You might assume they became arrogant, or that they secretly hate you, or that something you did pushed them away. But the truth is far simpler and far sadder than that. Their brain had simply reached its absolute limit, and cutting people off became the only way it knew how to survive and recharge. The brain was not shutting you out. It was shutting down entirely. Insight: if someone suddenly goes quiet on you, before you make it about yourself, ask honestly whether you had been taking from them without noticing. Sometimes the deepest silence is the loudest cry for rest that a person cannot bring themselves to ask for out loud. Visual, CCTV camera panning slowly, a person glancing over their shoulder in a crowd. Here is the disturbing part that most people never talk about. When a person is betrayed enough times, lied to, manipulated, gaslit, let down repeatedly by people they opened up to and genuinely trusted, the brain does not just get sad about it. It physically rewires itself. The amygdala, which is your brain's built-in threat detection system, goes into a state of permanent overdrive. It begins treating everyone around the person like a potential threat, even the people who have done absolutely nothing wrong, even the people who genuinely care. Psychology calls this hypervigilance, and it is not a personality flaw or a character defect. It is a survival mechanism. The brain is not being dramatic or difficult. It is doing exactly what millions of years of evolution designed it to do, which is to protect you from the kind of pain it already knows. The person who endured a toxic friendship for years, who was manipulated by a partner, who was abandoned by a parent at an age when they needed them most, their brain absorbed a single overwhelming lesson from all of it. People hurt you. So it started cutting people off first, before they ever got close enough to do the damage. Insight: if you recognize hypervigilance in yourself, try practicing what psychologists call evidence-based trust. Rather than opening up completely or shutting down entirely, test people slowly in small ways over time before giving them full access to who you are. Trust should be earned in installments, not handed over all at once. Visual: child sitting alone while other kids play, slowly fading to an adult alone in an empty apartment. Psychology reveals something deeply important about human behavior, and it starts long before adulthood. Attachment theory tells us that the way we bonded with our earliest caregivers, the consistency, the warmth, the safety or the lack of it, becomes the invisible template that shapes every single relationship we form for the rest of our lives. People who developed what psychologists call avoidant attachment learned one devastating lesson in their earliest years: needing people leads to pain. Maybe their needs were ignored. Maybe affection was unpredictable. Maybe showing vulnerability always ended in disappointment. So their brain built a wall, quietly and efficiently, and that wall eventually became their factory setting for how they navigate the world. On the outside, the avoidant person looks completely fine alone. They never ask for help, they keep their emotional distance, and they tend to disappear the moment a relationship starts to feel too real or too close. People around them often read this as coldness, arrogance, or indifference. But underneath all of it, the brain is simply running the only program that ever kept it safe: leave before you are left. Insight: avoidant attachment is not a life sentence. It can genuinely be rewired, but only through consistent, patient, non-threatening relationships that slowly prove the old pattern wrong. That process takes time, and for most people it requires therapy combined with a willingness to be vulnerable in small doses. Visual, mirror-shattering, person walking alone in a new city with new energy. Here is one that almost nobody discusses, and it might actually be the most important point in this entire video. Sometimes people do not cut others off because they are wounded or running from pain. They do it because they are actively changing, genuinely evolving, becoming a fundamentally different version of themselves, and the people around them have become anchors to the old version they are trying to leave behind. Psychology describes this through the concept of identity foreclosure, where your social environment locks you into who you used to be. Every time you spend time with those people, the brain reverts almost automatically. The old habits resurface. The old insecurities come flooding back. The old version of you walks back in through the door. Cutting those people off is not an act of rejection in those cases. It is an act of self-preservation for a self that is still being built. The person who got sober and quietly disappeared from their entire social circle, the one who moved to a new city and stopped returning calls from hometown friends. To outsiders this looks like abandonment or arrogance. But inside that person's psychology, it is one of the most courageous decisions they have ever made. Insight: take an honest look at the people around you and ask yourself whether certain relationships are only held together by who you used to be. Real growth sometimes demands both geographic and emotional distance, and choosing that distance is not betrayal, it is evolution. Now here is where the psychology gets genuinely dark. Not everyone who cuts people off is running from exhaustion or growing into something better. Some people cut others off as a deliberate act of punishment, and understanding this pattern is one of the most important things you can do for your own mental health. In dark psychology, this is called the narcissistic discard. When someone with strong narcissistic traits feels criticized, publicly embarrassed, or simply decides that you no longer serve a useful purpose in their life, they do not argue with you, they do not try to communicate or resolve anything. They remove you entirely, without warning, without explanation, as if you never mattered at all. And the chilling part is that they feel nothing while doing it. You have seen this dynamic play out. The person who was your closest friend until the day you respectfully disagreed with them, or set a boundary, or simply stopped making yourself available on their terms. And then they were gone. No closure, no explanation, just a cold wall of silence. That silence is not grief or hurt. It is control, and it is designed to leave you confused and questioning yourself. Insight: if you have been discarded by someone who fits this pattern, understand that the absence of closure is entirely intentional. Your brain will crave an explanation, will replay every conversation searching for what you did wrong. Resist that urge. The explanation is simply that they were never as genuinely attached to you as you were to them. Visual: notifications flooding a screen, a crowded noisy street, then sudden cut to one person alone in total silence. We are living in the most socially overwhelming era in all of human history. Constant notifications, endless group chats, the unspoken expectation that you are always available, always reachable, always on. For most people this is merely exhausting. But for certain brain types, introverts, highly sensitive people, and those on the neurodivergent spectrum, this level of relentless stimulation is not just tiring. It is genuinely unbearable on a neurological level. These brains do not filter incoming social information the way average brains do. Everything lands harder, stays longer, and costs more energy to process. The noise of other people, even people they love, becomes something the nervous system simply cannot sustain. And at a certain point the only logical response the brain can generate is to remove the source of the overload, which is other people. The person who seemed warm and engaged and socially present, and then one day just vanished from every group chat, stopped responding, stopped showing up, most people labeled them as strange or antisocial. But what was actually happening inside their nervous system was a desperate attempt at self-regulation. Their silence was not a statement about you. It was medicine for them. Insight: if you recognize this pattern in yourself, start protecting specific hours of genuine alone time as non-negotiable. Psychologists call this a social recharge ritual, and it is not antisocial behavior. It is responsible nervous system management that makes you more present and more capable when you do show up for people. Visual: a single candle burning in a dark room, slow zoom, music becoming warmer and softer. And here is the final point, and honestly the one that hits the hardest. Sometimes people cut everyone off not because they are damaged or avoidant or protecting their identity. They do it because they finally, after years of not doing it, decided that they were worth protecting. Psychology consistently shows that people with long histories of people-pleasing, chronic self-sacrifice, and emotional self-abandonment eventually reach a point of complete internal exhaustion. Not the kind that one good night of sleep fixes, but the deep, cellular kind that comes from years of giving everything to everyone while quietly disappearing from your own life. And then one day, with no dramatic announcement and no big explanation, something shifts. The brain generates a feeling that is not anger and not resentment but something quieter and more final: enough. Think about the person who was everyone's emotional support system for years, the one people called at 2 in the morning, the one who always had space for everyone else's problems while their own went unaddressed. They gave and gave until there was genuinely nothing left to give. And then they went quiet. Not because they stopped caring about the people around them, but because they finally, for the first time, started caring about themselves. And that is not a tragedy. That is the beginning of something real. Insight: if you are that person, the one who has spent years being everyone's anchor while slowly drowning yourself, know this clearly: choosing yourself is not selfishness. It is the most honest and necessary act of self-improvement you will ever commit to, and the people who truly belong in your life will understand it. Soft warm lighting, calm music, text appearing gently on screen. So here is what psychology actually tells us about people who cut everyone off. They are not all cold, they are not all broken, and they are certainly not all villains in someone else's story. Some of them are completely depleted and have nothing left to offer. Some are in the middle of becoming a version of themselves that the old environment simply could not contain. Some are survivors of a nervous system that was pushed past every limit it had. And some are people who, perhaps for the very first time, decided that they deserved to be treated with the same care and patience they had been endlessly extending to everyone else. Human behavior is never as simple as it looks from the outside, and the brain is always doing something far deeper and far more complex than what shows up on the surface. So the next time someone goes silent on you, before you decide what it means about your worth or what you did wrong, pause and ask what their brain might be trying to protect them from. Understanding someone is not the same as excusing them. But it changes everything about how you carry the experience. If this video shifted something for you, drop a comment below and tell me honestly, are you the one who cuts people off, or the one who has been cut off? I read every single comment. And if you want to keep going deeper into the hidden psychology behind the people in your life, subscribe, because the next video is going to disturb you in the best possible way. Next time we are going even deeper into dark psychology. We are talking about the people who never cut you off, who stay, who show up, who seem devoted, but whose reasons for being in your life have absolutely nothing to do with love. Psychology calls it parasocial attachment, and once you understand it, you will never look at your closest relationships the same way again.